Today we continue the coverage ranking the songs on each Beatles album, and we arrive at the self-titled 1968 White Album, this being the longest album in the Beatles catalog, spanning 2 CDs. I'm going to go through as usual and rank all 30 tracks on the album. Again, this list is for entertainment purposes only, and it's my opinions only. You may and probably will disagree. That's fine. If you want to comment down below, that's totally fine. If you want to share your own opinions, all I ask is that you keep it civil and no insults or rude comments. I will delete anything that is distasteful. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. At the bottom of the list, at number 30, I have Wild Honey Pie. This is a short, minute-long instrumental. You could have left this off the album and no one would have known the difference. At number 29, I have Revolution 9. This track belonged on a John Lennon solo album or a Yoko Ono avant-garde album. It didn't belong on a Beatles album. The only reason I'm not putting it at the very bottom is because it's at least more ambitious than Wild Honey Pie. At number 28, I have The Continuing Story of Bungalow Bill. There were a lot of flirtations with country sounds throughout the Beatles' career, and this actually is not a bad attempt at it, just not one of the more memorable tunes on here. Although it is noteworthy for being one of the few Beatles songs that has vocal parts by Yoko Ono, for better or worse. At number 27, I have Long, Long, Long. We get 4 George Harrison songs on the White Album, and admittedly, this is probably the least memorable of the 4. I had to go back and listen to the album just to remember even what this one was. Number 26, I have Honey Pie. Not to be confused with Wild Honey Pie. This one's at least a coherent, average-length song. But at the same time, I can't really say a whole lot more about it than that. Not a bad tune, but not one I find myself coming back to too terribly often. Number 25, I have Obla-Dee, Obla-Da. Good luck getting that chorus out of your head when you're done listening to this one. But is that positive entertainment or is it torture? I guess that depends on the listener. I don't dislike this song, but again, not really one of my personal favorites either. At number 24, I have Good Night. This is just a very slow melodic ballad that serves as the outro to the album, featuring Ringo on vocals, and thus making this the only Beatles album to have more than one song that has Ringo doing vocals. And it makes for a pretty good and appropriate outro. It's just, admittedly, not one of the best tunes on here. At number 23, I have Rocky Raccoon. Again, another flirtation with country sounds, this one by Paul. And of the 2 songs on the album that sort of flirt with that sound, I would say this is probably my preferred of the 2. But even then, it's still not one of the best tunes on the album. We still got a few tunes to go before we start getting into the 2/3 of the album that are really good. At number 22, I have Blackbird. I mean, this is a Paul McCartney ballad. Not much else you can really say, but it's a well-done Paul McCartney ballad. And at this point, we're starting to get into the better tracks on the album. At number 20, I have Cry Baby Cry. Pretty solid little tune here. And this one actually is memorable and for good reasons, which is more than I can say for some of the earlier tunes on the album. Again, like I've said in the past, I think this would have been a better album if it had just been one CD with all the highlights, because there are some tracks that feel like fillers, but here we're starting to get into the stuff that's actually pretty coherent and stands on its own. At number 19, I have Your Blues. Pretty good John Lennon blues rocker here, and it is one that I actually do find myself listening to a pretty fair amount. At number 18, I have Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except for Me and My Monkey. Aside from having the longest song title of any Beatles song ever written, it's a pretty solid little John Lennon rocker, and I would say this one's worth your time. At number 17, I have Birthday. If you're listening to the album on CD, this kicks off the second CD, and it's actually a pretty good little rocker that starts that side of the album. And it's one of the other tracks on here that does have some vocal work from Yoko, again, for better or worse. At number 16, I have Why Don't We Do It in the Road? Probably the greatest song title of all time. Certainly not the greatest Beatles song of all time. And despite its short duration, though, this is a pretty memorable one. I mean, how can you not get that title out of your head? At number 15, I have Martha, My Dear, Paul McCartney's ode to his sheepdog. And it's a fun, happy pop tune with a lot of piano. I actually do quite like this song. even if it's not quite in the upper echelon of what the Beatles put out on the White Album. Number 14, I have Piggies, this being one of George Harrison's songs. This time, we get a harpsichord and some very fun satirical lyrics. I mean, get through this one without a smile on your face. I dare you. At number 13, we have Don't Pass Me By, the other song on here sung by Ringo and the one of the two that he actually wrote. I think this was actually the first Ringo song on a Beatles album to which he had the sole writing credit. And it's a fun little bluesy pop rocker. You kind of have to hear this one to believe it. It is an interesting tune and a pretty underrated one if you ask me. At number 12, I have Julia, this being John Lennon's ballad that was an ode to his late mother, and actually a pretty well done one. At 11, I have I'm So Tired, bit of a slower track, but still has some appealing pop elements despite that. At number 10, I have Happiness is a Warm Gun. Again, another pretty funny title, but actually a pretty good song, and I'm happy to say that when I listen to the album, this is not one that I skip over. At number 9, I have Sexy Sadie, this being a scathing criticism from John Lennon, and the actual stories behind this song are probably more interesting than the song itself, but the song itself actually is a very good one. At number 8, I have I Will, pretty short pop ballad, but a very well done pop ballad. There are a lot of underrated tunes on this album. Some of the stuff on here is filler, but some of it is actual, legitimate, underrated music, and I would certainly put I Will in that category. At number 7, I have Glass Onion. This one, of course, has a great time, just like dropping song titles of older Beatles songs, but creating an infectious pop rock song despite it all. At number 6, I have Revolution 1. Not to be confused with Revolution 9 or the song Revolution that was only released as a single. This is essentially a slower acoustic version of the song Revolution. And it's a pretty good one, and it's a shame that most people don't seem to know this one exists since it tends to live in the shadow of its electric brother that was only released as a single. It is a good unplugged take on the tune. I will forever prefer the electric version, but this acoustic number shouldn't be overlooked. At number 5, I have Savoy Truffle. Probably, in my opinion, the most underrated song on the record. This is a George Harrison song that's just a straight-up rocker talking about Eric Clapton's love of desserts. It's a better song than you would think, and this one deserves a second look. At number 4, I have Helter Skelter. I don't think there's any song on this album that's been more influential than Helter Skelter. I mean, this was pretty influential on a lot of hard rock and heavy metal bands. I mean, when it's a Beatles song that Motley Crue does a cover of, that should say something right there about how widely influential the band is. In particular, this song. It's a great predecessor to a lot of the things to come in the rock world, and a solid Beatles tune all around. At number 3, I have Dear Prudence. There are a lot of ballads on the White Album, and this is certainly one of the best of the lot. And it's been covered by everyone from Saigon Kick to Susie and the Banshees. So again, just going to show how influential and diverse the sound of the Beatles truly was. At number 2, I have Back in the USSR. Do you want to know how to start an album right? This is how you do it. This is just an all-out rocker from Paul McCartney, and the track never lets up. It's got some of the best Beatles guitar work. It's got some of the best lyrics and vocal delivery. I absolutely love this song, and again, it's one that's pretty influential and widely recognized. But my absolute favorite song on the White Album, out of all the 30 tracks, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Again, George Harrison got 4 tracks on this album, but this is the best of the 4. It is a memorable ballad that's certainly slow-paced, but it does get livened up a bit by the guitar solo from Eric Clapton. Probably my favorite Beatles song if I had to choose just one, and that's certainly not an easy task when you have a catalog of hundreds of songs. And there you have it. What's your favorite song on the White Album? What's your least favorite? Comment down below and let me know what you think. Again, all I ask is that you keep it civil. Also, remember to subscribe to this channel for more content, because I'm always posting new videos, and make sure you give this one a like if you found it helpful. I'm Taylor T. Carlson. See you next time.